Under a gray and rainy sky that draped the small university town of Texas in an oppressive melancholy, Mark Davis, a 23-year-old law student, walked heavily on a shiny sidewalk, his backpack carelessly thrown over one shoulder, his face marked by a worry that seemed etched into his skin. Barely out of adolescence, he juggled his final year of law studies, a part-time job at a shabby cafe, and a mountain of debts inherited from his late father, a man whose financial mistakes had left a broken family and an uncertain future. Each unpaid bill, each call from creditors tightened the noose around Mark, whose nights were haunted by the specter of failure and the fear of not being able to provide for his sick mother and his younger sister, whose tuition fees piled up like a threatening cloud. As he walked, lost in his thoughts, his phone vibrated in his pocket, pulling him from his reverie, and he answered in a weary voice, Mark Davis speaking. An authoritative, composed female voice resonated. Mr. Davis, this is Eleanor Brooks. I would like to meet with you. It concerns your financial situation. Words that made Mark furrow his brow, suspicious. I'm sorry, who are you? How do you know? But she interrupted him with a chilling confidence. I know enough. Let's meet at Brooks Bistro at 7 p.m. It's important. Before hanging up, leaving Mark perplexed, a mix of confusion and curiosity taking hold of him. Driven by an intuition he did not yet understand, he headed towards the upscale cafe, the rain intensifying, soaking his worn jacket that struggled to protect him. Inside, the atmosphere was warm, the dim lights and the smell of fresh coffee contrasting with the cold outside. At a corner table, he spotted Eleanor Brooks, a striking 71-year-old woman, her silver hair impeccably styled, dressed in an elegant suit that exuded wealth, her piercing blue eyes fixed on him as she invited him to sit. Mark, she said in a calm but authoritative tone. Hesitant, he took a seat, asking, Madam Brooks, what is this about? She replied straightforwardly, straight to the point, perfect, setting down her teacup before continuing. I know about your debts, those left by your father. I know you are barely surviving. I am here to offer you a solution. Confused, Mark asked, and what would that solution be? The words that followed left him stunned. Marry me. A proposal so surreal that he blinked, believing he had misheard. Pardon? Eleanor, impassive, clarified. You heard me. This is not a question of romance. It's a business arrangement. I will pay off all your debts. I will guarantee your financial security, and in return, you will be my husband. An incredulous laugh escaped Mark. You're serious? Why me? You don't even know me. She leaned slightly forward, her piercing eyes never leaving him. Precisely, you are young, unencumbered, and desperate enough to consider this. I don't need love, Mark. I need a companion, someone to carry my name, my estate. Nothing more. Think of it as a contract. Shaking his head, his mind racing, Mark protested. This is insane. What do you gain from it? And for the first time, Eleanor's expression softened, a glimmer of vulnerability passing through her eyes. I've spent my life alone, Mark. I have no children or family. I want companionship, even if it's just a facade, and I want to control my inheritance. A husband will help me solidify that. Overwhelmed, Mark stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. I can't. I need time to think. And Eleanor replied coldly, Of course, but don't take too long. The offer won't last forever. Leaving Mark to walk home in the rain, his mind tormented by a proposal that seemed both salvatory and terrifying, a choice that could change his life or destroy it. As the rain hammered the streets of the small Texas town, Mark returned home, his heart heavy, Eleanor Brooks' words, "Marry me," echoing in his mind. In the cramped apartment he shared with his mother, he sat at the kitchen table, medical bills piling up like silent accusers. His mother, sensing his distress, placed a trembling hand on his. "Mark, what's wrong?" And he told her everything. He recounted the meeting with Eleanor, the absurd proposal, the offer to pay their debts. She listened in silence. Her eyes filled with sadness mixed with hope. She murmured, "I know it seems unthinkable, but if she's willing to help, maybe it's worth considering." Mark felt betrayed by his own principles. "You're asking me to marry a woman I don't love, just to solve our problems?" His mother, tears in her eyes, replied, "I'm asking you to save yourself, to save us." This conversation left him torn between disgust for the idea and the brutal reality of their financial despair. Unable to sleep, he spent the night weighing the sacrifice of his freedom against the promise of a future free from debt. A future where his mother could receive the care she needed and his sister could pursue her studies. The next morning, driven by resignation and duty, he returned to Brooks Bistro, where Eleanor was waiting for him. Eleanor sat at the same table, her calm demeanor contrasting with Mark's inner turmoil. Without looking up from her tablet, she asked, "Have you made a decision?" Mark, taking a deep breath, replied, "I will do it." Words that seemed torn from his soul, heavy with the weight of a choice he knew was irreversible. Eleanor set down her tablet, a discreet smile forming on her lips. "Good. Arrangements will be made immediately." And before he could fully grasp the magnitude of his commitment, the gears of a well-oiled machine began to turn. A week later, Mark stood in a stark courtroom, dressed in a suit provided by Eleanor, a fabric impeccably tailored but feeling foreign against his skin, like a disguise from a life he had not chosen. The ceremony was brief, almost clinical, attended only by Eleanor's lawyer and a notary, their vows exchanged in a heavy silence, devoid of the joy or love that typically accompany a marriage. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Eleanor turned to him, a cold smile not reaching her eyes. "Welcome to your new life, Mr. Davis," words that sounded more like a sentence than a celebration. As he left the courthouse under a light rain, Mark caught a glimpse of his reflection in a puddle, his face marked by a haunting question. Had he saved his family, or had he sold his soul? As the taxi pulled away, carrying that moment into the past, he couldn't shake the feeling that this marriage, meant to be a solution, was the beginning of a much darker mystery, a path where each step brought him closer to a truth he wasn't sure he wanted to uncover, but could no longer avoid. As Mark's taxi turned onto the winding driveway leading to Eleanor Brooks' estate, the wrought iron gates creaked open solemnly. He felt a lump form in his throat, the immense mansion standing before him like a monument to ancient wealth. Its imposing columns and immaculate stone facade evoking a museum more than a home. Yet, despite its grandeur, the dark windows seemed devoid of life, as if the building itself was holding its breath, keeping secrets that Mark was not ready to confront. He stepped out of the vehicle, suitcase in hand, feeling like an intruder in a world that did not belong to him, a lost traveler in a dream, or perhaps a nightmare that was not his own. Eleanor welcomed him in the hall, her appearance as polished as during their first meeting, dressed in an elegant gown that seemed to defy time. "Welcome, Mr. Davis," she said, the formal address sending a shiver down Mark's spine. As if she were erecting a barrier between them from the very first moment. "I hope everything will be to your satisfaction. Dinner is at 7 p.m., she added before entrusting him to a silent maid who guided him to his room. An opulent space with a king-size bed, antique furniture, and windows overlooking impeccably maintained gardens, but despite its luxury, the room felt cold, as if no human breath had ever resided there. That evening, Mark sat uncomfortably at the far end of a long dining table, Eleanor at the other end, dressed in a silk blouse and pearls, the physical distance between them reflecting the emotional chasm that separated them. The meal, prepared by an invisible chef and served by mute staff, was extravagant, but each bite felt bland under the weight of the oppressive silence. "I hope you are settling in well," Eleanor said, cutting her filet mignon with surgical precision, and Mark, cautious, replied, "It's different. This place is immense. I feel like I could get lost in it." A sly smile passed over Eleanor's lips. "You'll get used to it or not. Either way, you're here." A remark that made Mark shudder, her brutal frankness revealing a harsher side of the woman he had just married. Seeking to know more, he dared to ask, "You haven't talked much about your late husband." And Eleanor's knife stopped short, her fingers tightening slightly before she dabbed her mouth with a napkin. "He was a businessman, like your father. Their paths crossed once or twice," she said, her tone darkening. But, as you can imagine, not all encounters end well. The ambiguity of her response quickened Mark's pulse. "What do you mean?" he asked, but she evaded, her piercing eyes piercing through him. "Let's just say unfinished business tends to linger," before raising her wine glass, ending the conversation. These cryptic words left Mark with a growing unease, a feeling that this marriage, meant to be a mere contract, hid far more complex intentions. After dinner, he wandered through the corridors of the manor, the silence broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards, passing locked doors with brass handles gleaming in the dim light. Each door seemed to whisper secrets he was not meant to uncover. As he settled into his room, the surrounding luxury only heightened his sense of isolation. It was as if the manor itself was a guardian of truths that Eleanor did not want to reveal, and Mark, lying in the darkness, began to wonder if this marriage was not just a means to save his family. He pondered whether it was a plunge into a dangerous game whose rules he still did not know. In the following days, Eleanor Brooks' mansion became for Mark a gilded prison, where every luxury seemed designed to mask a darker truth. The heavy silences and furtive glances of the staff amplified this feeling. Mark, accustomed to the simplicity of his student apartment, felt like a stranger in this opulent universe. Each step echoed in vast spaces, and Eleanor's smiles were tinged with a coldness that put him on guard. The staff, discreet yet omnipresent, avoided his gaze, their whispers dying down as soon as he entered a room. One evening, he overheard snippets of conversation that made his stomach churn. "Why him?" murmured one voice, followed by another. "She never does anything without reason. He'll figure it out. They always do." These words planted a seed of doubt in Mark's mind. Mark suspected his marriage was not merely a financial arrangement, but a piece in a much larger puzzle. At dinner, Eleanor maintained a facade of courtesy, contrasting with the tension from her silences. When Mark tried to ask questions about Eleanor's past, she responded with generalities, with hard work, Mark, and sacrifices, her eyes daring him to dig deeper. One evening, while exploring the library, a sanctuary of leather-bound books and mahogany furniture, Mark noticed Eleanor's desk cluttered with papers and a small ornate key. His heart raced, an impulse urging him to check that no one was watching. In a surge of curiosity mixed with fear, he seized the key, its cold, heavy surface in his palm. Could it open one of the locked doors? He wondered, as the mystery of Eleanor's mansion deepened around him. His heart racing as he slipped the key into his pocket, an act that felt both insignificant and monumental. That night, lying in his room, he turned the key between his fingers, questions swirling in his mind. What was Eleanor hiding? Why had she chosen him, an inconsequential student? The manor, with its oppressive silences, seemed to whisper answers he wasn't sure he wanted to hear. In the days that followed, he began to pay attention to the details, the nervous glances of the servants, Eleanor's prolonged absences, the phone calls she took in hushed tones in her office. One morning, while she was away, he overheard a conversation between two employees. "She's transferring everything. He doesn't suspect a thing." Words that made his heart leap, reinforcing his feeling of being a pawn in a game whose rules he didn't know. Unable to shake these suspicions, Mark decided to seek answers, his instinct telling him that the key was the first step toward the truth. Every night, as the manor sank into spectral silence, he felt the weight of this decision, a mix of fear and determination taking hold of him. He knew that uncovering Eleanor's secrets could either free him or destroy him. In this house where every shadow seemed to carry a secret, Mark, at 23, found himself navigating a world of duplicity. His marriage, meant to be a lifeline, becoming a riddle he had to solve to regain control of his life. In the oppressive quiet of the manor, Mark, holding an ornate key, felt adrenaline as he slipped into a dark corridor. His footsteps muffled by thick carpets, he approached a locked door, the brass handle glimmering under moonlight. Casting a glance over his shoulder, he inserted the key into the lock. The discreet click resonated like thunder in the silence, sending a shiver down Mark's spine. Slowly, he pushed the door open, revealing a room frozen in time, a sanctuary of forgotten memories. Dusty furniture, yellowed papers, and photographs told a story the manor had sought to bury. The images showed a young Eleanor alongside her late husband, Harold, and another couple Mark did not recognize. Their smiles contrasted with the gloomy atmosphere of the room. But it was the stack of documents on the desk that caught his attention. Pages filled with legal terms detailed failed business transactions between Harold Brooks and Mark's father, accusations of fraud and deceit that led to the Brooks family's financial ruin. A letter condemned Mark's father, whose actions shattered Eleanor's fortune and heart. Breathless, Mark leafed through the documents, stumbling upon a marriage license bearing his name and Eleanor's, dated weeks before the ceremony. This revelation left him stunned. She had planned all this long before their meeting. Mark opened a leather-bound journal, Eleanor's entries revealing a meticulous plan to trap him in marriage, not for love, but to settle an old score. I will take everything from him, just as his father did to me. He will be my pawn. She wrote, words that made Mark shudder, his blood freezing as he realized the extent of her manipulation. Suddenly, a crack behind him broke the silence, and Eleanor's voice, cold as a blade, sliced through the darkness. Are you having fun, Mark? He turned around, heart racing, guilt and fear painted on his face. Eleanor, he stammered. She stepped into the room, her silhouette outlined against the hallway light. Did you think you would find answers here? Curiosity kills, Mark. What are you doing? Gathering his courage, he replied in a low but firm voice. Why did you really marry me? It's about my father, isn't it? Revenge. Eleanor's eyes hardened, her calm facade cracking. It's not for you to ask questions, do as you're told, and you'll come out of this marriage better off than you started. Isn't that enough? But Mark, fists clenched, exploded. Enough? You lied to me, manipulated me. This isn't a marriage, it's a trap. A chilling smile spread across Eleanor's lips. A trap? Maybe you should have thought twice before signing those papers. You're just like your father, blind to the damage you cause until it's too late. Anger surged in Mark. If you hated him so much, why take it out on me? I have nothing to do with what he did to your family. A tense silence settled, Eleanor staring at him for a long moment before turning on her heel. You're out of your depth, Mark. Stay out of matters that don't concern you, leaving behind a warning that echoed like a threat. Alone in the room, Mark felt the weight of this revelation, the truth about Eleanor's intentions turning the manor into a labyrinth of duplicity. Every step toward the truth brought him closer to a danger he could not yet fully comprehend, but was determined to face to regain control of his life. As the manor seemed to hold its breath in the darkness, its thick walls imprisoning the echoes of the confrontation in the secret room. Mark, his heart still racing from the shock of revelations, the accusatory letter, Eleanor's journal detailing her plan to make him a pawn in her quest for revenge against her father, felt a wave of anger and fear wash over him. The truth about this marriage, which he had believed to be a mere financial contract, unveiled itself as a carefully woven web to trap him in a decades-old vendetta. Eleanor's words, "You are just like your father, blind to the damage you cause," echoed in his mind, not as an accusation, but as an attempt to manipulate him, to bind him to the guilt of a man he had never truly known. Unable to remain still, he paced his room, the ornate key still in his pocket, a tangible reminder of the secret he had uncovered, and every creak of the floorboards seemed to whisper a question. How far was Eleanor willing to go to satisfy her revenge? The next morning, as the sun barely pierced the heavy curtains of the manor, he found her in the dining room, her usual calm intact, slicing her grapefruit with mechanical precision, but her eyes, when they met his, sparkled with an intensity that betrayed her distrust. "You've been quite busy, haven't you?" she said, her voice cold as a blade, and Mark, feeling the tension rise, replied, his throat tight, "I don't know what you're talking about." But Eleanor smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Don't play innocent with me, Mark. If you think you can fool me, you're sorely mistaken. I've faced opponents far craftier than you." Determined not to yield, he clenched his fists under the table, his voice trembling yet firm. "I know everything, Eleanor, about my father, about Harold, about what you're trying to do. This marriage is just revenge, isn't it?" For the first time, Eleanor's facade wavered, her lips pinching slightly. But she quickly regained her composure, leaning towards him, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "If you betray me, Mark, you will regret it. Remember that." These words, laden with threat, made Mark shudder. But they also ignited his determination, for he refused to remain a pawn in her game, a tool to soothe the pain he had not caused. "Why me?" he asked, his voice rising despite himself. "I have nothing to do with what my father did. Why should I pay for his mistakes?" Eleanor fixed him with a stare, a tense silence stretching between them, and for a moment, he thought he saw a glimmer of regret in her eyes, but she straightened up, her tone turning icy again. "You are out of your depth, Mark. Know your place." Before leaving the room, her heels clicking on the floor like a warning. Alone, Mark felt the weight of this confrontation, the truth about Eleanor's intentions, to avenge the ruin of her family and the death of Harold by manipulating the son of her enemy. Turning the manor into a cage from which he had to escape, that night, unable to sleep, he heard Eleanor's voice in his office, her words muffled but urgent. "Make sure the transfer is complete. We cannot let him back out now. Time is running out." A conversation that chilled his blood. Confirming that his role in this marriage went beyond mere personal vengeance, possibly involving financial or legal maneuvers he did not yet understand. Every word, every glance from Eleanor reinforced his conviction that he had to act, not only to protect himself, but to end this cycle of pain and manipulation. At 23, Mark, a student who had believed he was saving his family by signing a contract, found himself at the heart of a dangerous game, where the truth was both his only weapon and his greatest risk, a truth he was determined to expose, no matter the cost, for he knew that remaining passive meant condemning himself to a life under the yoke of a woman consumed by hatred, a prospect he refused to accept. As the manor seemed to close in on him like a gilded prison, its labyrinthine corridors and opulent rooms becoming constant reminders of the trap he had fallen into. Mark, galvanized by the confrontation with Eleanor and the snippets of her conversation overheard, "The transfer is complete. Time is running out," decided to take action. Determined to uncover the extent of her plans and find a way to free himself from her grasp, aware that he could not act alone, he sought an ally within the manor, and his choice fell on Mr. Harris, the chief butler, a man of unflappable calm whose eyes seemed to carry the weight of ancient secrets. One evening, as shadows stretched in the library, Mark approached him, his voice low but urgent. "Mr. Harris, I need your help. Something is wrong here." And the butler, after a long scrutinizing look, replied with measured caution, "Mr. Davis, I was wondering how long it would take you to come to me." Hesitating, he added, "You are not the first young man to be drawn into Eleanor's world. She is clever, resourceful, and ruthless when it comes to her goals. My advice, watch your back." These words, though vague, confirmed Mark's suspicions. And he pressed further. "You know something about her, about all this, don't you?" But Mr. Harris, with a glimmer of regret, replied, "Some of us do not have the luxury of leaving," a phrase that suggested he was himself a prisoner of Eleanor's machinations, but his reluctance to say more pushed Mark to seek elsewhere. He contacted Peter, a law school friend, under the pretense of catching up, but quickly steered the conversation towards legal questions. "Peter, hypothetically, if someone signed a contract under duress or false pretenses, could they annul it?" And Peter, intrigued, replied, "Hypothetically, yes. But it depends on the evidence. Are you in some sort of trouble?" To which Mark dodged, "Just a project for school, thanks." Encouraged by this possibility, Mark intensified his research, taking advantage of Eleanor's absences to rummage through her desk, his fingers trembling as he opened drawers, searching for clues about her intentions. Late one night, he found an envelope addressed to his father, containing a scathing letter from Eleanor. "You left us with nothing. My husband's heart couldn't handle the stress. He died because of you. I will make sure your family pays." Words that confirmed this marriage was not just an act of revenge, but an attempt to destroy his father's legacy through him. This discovery, like a stab to the heart, strengthened his resolve, and he shared the letter with Peter during a secret meeting, revealing everything: the marriage, the documents, the journal. Together, they compiled the evidence, uncovering recent documents on dubious partnerships and falsified reports, business activities bordering on illegality, aimed at rebuilding Eleanor's empire at any cost. Peter, examining the papers, warned, "Mark, this is enough to bring her down, but be careful. If she suspects you're onto her, who knows what she might do?" And Mark, his face serious, replied, "She has already done enough harm. It's time for it to stop." Back at the manor, he felt Eleanor's eyes on him, her growing suspicion palpable. One morning, as he was having breakfast, she entered, her piercing gaze fixed on him. "You've been busy, Mark, haven't you?" He felt his heart race, but he held firm. "I do what I have to do." This tension peaked when he confronted Eleanor in the grand salon, the hidden evidence in his bag, his voice steady. "I know everything about my father, about Harold, about what you're doing to rebuild your fortune." And for the first time, Eleanor's mask cracked, her eyes widening as she stared at the documents he brandished. "You searched again, didn't you? Do you even understand what your father did to my family?" Mark, refusing to back down, replied, "I understand that you are hurt, but what about the people you've hurt along the way? What about me? I don't deserve this." As the confrontation reached its peak, he felt he had finally regained control, exposing the truth and ending Eleanor's game. A bitter but necessary victory in a manor where the shadows of the past had reigned for too long.